referring to things that I'd already mentioned, but the primary is based on repetition, not variety, while in the secondary world, variety is needed to grow. It appears that the conflict of the primary life's variety and repetition is its growth. Does life, from its level of consciousness down, feel that it too is being mistreated? You ready? Could we start with a consideration for you to ponder this? A kind of little mythical progression that from ordinary views, just what ordinary people think of as being ordinarily conscious, just staring here and there, at that level at which everyone starts, at which everyone is born, things seem to be personal and local. Then in this mythical progression, if someone became in any way out of the ordinary, we might say that they begin to see things more connected and universal. But could I suggest that there is, never mind suggest, can you bear for me to tell you that there is a fresher, there is an even extended, more radical sight that whatever it is simply is, and it's just standing there alone. And it may even have, if it talked, it might even have something to say that could be of perhaps a profane comment on the idea of things being connected. That would be somewhere past in this progression. That everything is in some way separate, everything is local, everything is personal to me. Then through great mystical, extreme, drug-induced, personal efforts, a person begins to see, in the secondary sense, that things are not so personal, things are not so individually directed, things are not so isolated, things are more connected. That's as far as you find any history of any extraordinary effort going. That's it. No matter what you imagine, that is the end of history. Extraordinary history. But I'm telling you, past that point, which ordinary intellect can't begin to conceive of, is why I'm pointing it out to some of the newer, fresher areas of some of you people. Past the point that, things are connected, things are universal. There's a place beyond that. That whatever it is just there. And there is no connection. For the time being, let's put it, things are unconnected. It would be only this kind of whatever it is. And it does exist. I took back my suggestion. No need to play rhetorical games. Either you can hear some of this or not, and if not enough of you can, we can move on to something else some other time. But only unconnected information, only unconnected thought on your own can be like the circular manhole cover, if you recall it we used as an example once. It is only a circular cutout in the 3D world, and even more so, but it is only the circular manhole cover that cannot fall through itself. Any other shape can. It is only unconnected thought that will never fall through itself. It is only unconnected thought, information. You can put them sliced together right now. It is only unconnected thought that has no opposite, which is the cutoff line, again, of all recorded history, is the cutoff line of all neural history inside the common standing of everyone's DNA, that the best that you can hope for under even extraordinary conditions, ordinarily, is the feeling that things are connected, and there may be some minor additional information having to do with the mystical, metaphysical, transcendental connection of opposites. Maybe a little bit that I, Buddha, or whoever, I'm just using that rhetorically, do not quite see. There's something beyond that. It would only be unconnected thought that has no opposite. Therefore, there is nothing additional to see. There is nothing to say that, well, perhaps there are some transcendental refinements that I may have yet to discover. It would be only this kind of multidimensional, unconnected thought that would require no propping up. Whereas everything else out in the playing field of the intellect has got to be propped up. And it's according to how you have been seeing it. I've tried to sketch it in several ways. That Raleigh Fingers has got to prop up Boog Powell, or you can't see him. Up has got to be propped up out there in the outfield by down, or there is no depth to it. The intellect cannot perceive its own thought. The energy would be flowing through, if there was any, the energy would be flowing through one's brain, and you would still not be thinking. You might as well be, the best description I guess, you would be in some sort of coma. That you may still be alive and they could measure electrical energy going through your brain, but if we could play with history and suddenly bring you out of the coma and say, what have you been thinking about? And you'd go, hey, I ain't been thinking, I'm in a damn coma, what do you want? It would be energy that had no landscape, energy that had no depth. It would be thought that was not being thought. It would be energy not turned into thought. But I'm telling you there's a place beyond that. And it's not just in a spatial sense, but it is a place. It would be the unconnected thought would be the only kind of thought that required no propping up. And it would be the only kind of thought, the only kind of information that had no opposite. It would be the only kind of information that could never fall back through itself. It could never turn on itself. It could not be reversed in the polarization. So it could, the energy behind it, or to call it thought and information, being unconnected, it has no polarization. So what I was going to say, which if any of you can follow this, is a waste of time, but since it's not true to start with, it can't ever be false. Or, since it's not false to begin with, it cannot ever be true. It cannot ever be reversed. It has no polarization. It's simply standing there. It simply is. It would be only this kind of multidimensional, this kind of unconnected thought, this kind of knowledge that can exist without a because. Everything else, even that which history has recorded, not only in the external world, but inside of people's memory, inside the DNA structure of humanity. Anything that is because. Or anything that is not because. Thought cannot exist without because. No matter if it seems to be that kind of transcendental thought, if it seems to be the greatest thought ever thunk. Whoever you might have thunk had the greatest thunk. Aristotle, Moses, Buddha, whoever. Notice, you can go back and check it. They got books on all those characters. They all said things. And it's always because, even if they say, all right, I'm about to tell you something that is the most astounding, the most prodigious, the most breathtaking thing you've ever heard, whatever it is going to be on some basis of because. Unconnected information, unconnected thought, unconnected knowledge does not require because. And it does not exist inside the 3 or even 4-dimensional realm of the human intellect, but it does exist. Somewhat of an aside, could I point out to you, since all of you know it, history is also replete, not just with history, thank God, but little sidesteps of history, hiding within so-called cults and would-be systems and all sorts of things, have been a string, thousands of years of kind of non-sequitur-based jokes, Zen-type stories, in the greatest sense of the word, not just tied to that one area of the Far East, not just tied to some umbrella of Buddhism, but you understand there's kind of Zen-type stories. Those kind of good old stories that you have all read about that someone asked someone else, what would be the sound of one eye listening? And the promising respondent, after some length of time, as the story goes, one day says, the price of butter tends to fluctuate. The stories would have it then that this caused praise from the original questioner. Supposedly somebody knew something. The guy who proposed the question, what's the sound of one eye listening? Then the questioner, supposedly someone with extraordinary information, consciousness, knowledge, praises the person that finally says the price of butter tends to fluctuate. And they, in this kind of apparent progression, what that represents, the best they can make of it, is what that represents is that the respondent finally, after whatever it took, realizes that even things that apparently are not easily seen as being connected are connected. Now, I'm not going to explain anymore because people have spent their whole life pursuing this kind of stuff that and I say people, parts of life's body has spent 5,000 years pursuing this. That same thing of asking a question. You know, if God is good, if you don't like the Zen stories, if God and Allah, if the great forces are good, how come there's non-goodness? Same kind of thing, it just doesn't sound quite as smart-assy. Or it seems too tied to many people's religion. But life, a good part of its body, and a good major avant-garde part of its nervous system for years, thousands of years, was and is still dealing with what is the sound of one eye listening. The price of butter tends to fluctuate. That represents, at the best, so don't just laugh it off, it's what I'm trying to get you to see. People have, individuals, if it's too complex for me to talk about thousands of years of life's body, you know, people pack up and move to a monastery somewhere just so that somebody with a shaved head and all the whole work, the ritualistic thing says, all right, you can stay here, but here it is. Here is your question. Here is the question. What is the sound of one eye listening? Now you go and sit, or you go stay on your head, you do whatever the ritual is, and when you have the answer, you come see me. Next. And so people go and spend 30 or 40 years sitting somewhere thinking about that. And when it seems to be successful, even in an extraordinary way, by all ordinary intellectual perception, it is that the person goes, ah! And they go back and they ask to see the head guy. The guy asks him the question, and he says, ah! You got a response for me after 37 years? I remember you. And the guy says, the price of butter tends to fluctuate. And that represents, I'm not attacking it, that represents 35, 40 years of a life well spent. According to the people that happens to, those moments of enlightenment, the epiphany. Ah! Even at that level, some of them, this is not important, but some of them even have a non-understood inclination not to want to talk about it past that. And yet I'm going to at least tell you enough that I've already told you, but you should have heard it. What that is representing is that things that apparently have, the question to begin with is a non sequitur, of course. What's the sound? I just even made it worse. All of you know the historical one is what's the sound of one hand clapping. And I just thought, why not make it worse? What's the sound of one eye listening? All right, to begin with, it's a non sequitur. It doesn't fit. And so to ask somebody the question, and then they come back after 35 years, or life comes back, as it still continues to do after 6,000 years, and it says the answer is, or my response to that is, the price of butter tends to fluctuate. And the first source of energy, that is, the head monk, who it was that proposed the question, goes, ah! And so apparently the energy converges. Congratulations are in order. The person who said the price of butter tends to fluctuate, they will perhaps write a book, some of them do, some of them don't, and perhaps say, oh, that was it. My life was worthwhile that it... But I'm telling you what happens, and in one sense, In one sense, it is a kind of progression because that person's intellect is plugged in to a new place in itself, thus a new place in the life of life, wherein they see that things are no longer local and isolated, such as, what in the hell can you make out of a question of what's the sound of one hand clapping? And yet this person, I'm sure, is a harbinger, a cache of great secret information I want, so I got to respond. So in that sense, there is a kind of progression there. That, hey, that's not just a non sequitur. That's not just a piece of silly, loose information. And so their response sounds equally as silly and unrelated, and I'm telling you what that represents is, nothing. Even a question like the sound of one hand clapping, even an illogical question, if a human mind can think about it, in some way it's related to something. They begin to see a connection, and they may die happy very, very easily. And I'm insinuating, or I'm agreeing that it's beyond just the fun of making a lot of money for those that are interested in it. That is, the person that had this moment of enlightenment, that the response is, the price of butter tends to fluctuate. And of course, the response could have been, few chickens know how to read the stock quotations. It could be anything. But what I'm telling you is, to them, quite real, not questioning the validity of it. It is a progression of the nervous system because they see beyond the initial feeling of isolation, the separateness, and everything being in some way personally directed toward the person. There is some sort of great nexus that defies ordinary logic, but there is some great connection afoot here at the universe, and it strikes them. It's not just verbal. There is real reality to it. May I tell you, those of you with neurons, that no one has ever been able to perceive, but I'm going to tell it to you. There is a point beyond that story. There is a point beyond the interpretation I gave you, which I didn't just make up. I'm representing. I'm not playing around. I'm representing what actually happens in that kind of intellectual epiphany, enlightenment, the extension in that person's brain that very few chickens know how to read stock quotations as being a proper response to the question of what's the sound of one ear smelling. Past that I've interpreted for you validly, that they are seeing unsuspected connections. There's a point past that no one has ever seen in the story. And of course, I've been talking about it for the last, 20 minutes. And that point is, use the same story, the same question, the same response, but there is a message, there is a lesson beyond any of that, and that is that none of this is connected. That's epiphany that would make a Zen monk have to lay down and do something, call for his mother. There is a message, and it's right there. It's always been there. In all these stories, the Bible's full of it, the Quran, Hindu literature, all kinds of stories. I could stand here and start bringing up jokes. Either jokes that kids are telling out on a playground this week, or stories, fairy tales, or jokes that I might be able to trace back thousands of years. But beyond the apparent message of the jokes, the fairy tales, the legends, these kind of stories like non sequitur questions producing some kind of intellectual stimulation, if not widespread enlightenment in one person, having to do with, wait a minute, things are connected, which all fairy tales, almost all parables, everything has a moral. Well, you never thought about it. They tell the story and it says moral, semicolon, and it tells you. The moral is showing that all this is connected. Past all of those is the obvious. Of course, you're going to have to put that, I guess, in quotation marks. The obvious is that none of this is related. It's all unconnected. As well as being connected, of course. Well, how about some up-to-date examples going on right in front of you. I'll leave it to you, any of you who would like to consider it. I could stand here, I guess, for the rest of the night once I said that. All the fairy tales, all the morals, all the parables, just proverbs, truisms, all of them are moralistic. And of course, I don't mean that in a sense of morality. That is, the statement itself, even if it's just one sentence, is actually setting up something and then giving the punchline. And all that is saying all this is connected. But beyond that is something else. So at any rate, your memory is full of it. That is life's memory, history. But I was going to bring you, I can point out stuff that's right up to date. Things we've talked about before, and some of you might have thought that, boy, we really picked that apart. Get ready for picking. Consider how man's intellect, just ordinary intellect, knows full well, you can call it from experience or otherwise, but just every ordinary person knows full well that economists, priests, weather forecasters cannot predict anything. Everybody knows that. It's not even up to the level of a cheap shot to attack a weather person. I mean, that's below a cheap shot. And yet you can make people laugh, make some joke about weather forecaster or economist. And everybody, you can get a laugh, but that's not even a cheap shot. Because you shouldn't even laugh at it. It's because laughing, ordinarily, is showing that you in some way see a connection, a reality that the people in the joke do not see. That is to set up a joke about economists, and them coming on, they say, well, we have with us today Professor so-and-so from such and such university. What do you think about the figures of the government released today having to do with the rise in the wholesale index prices? The man says, well, and they flash his name, Professor so-and-so, and he says, well, or Dr. so-and-so, Doctor of Economics. And he says, well, I feel that there is now an almost certainty within the next quarter we're going to see the beginnings of a recession. And all you've got to do is just have walking around sense, which everybody does, to know that that man cannot predict whatsoever any more than the greatest weather forecaster, the whole institution of the American government with these stations all over the country. They cannot pick out one area, one state, one local area and predict with any kind of certainty 24 hours from now what the weather's going to be. And yet they do it. And people will turn it on. People will listen to the economists. People will talk about it. But don't laugh, because to laugh is to infer that, well, wait a minute, they don't know any better. Listen to me. They damn well know better. Nobody's intelligence believes, you would have to be below any kind of discussing level of ordinary intelligence. You would have to be an anomaly that I wouldn't want to be locked up in a coach class with. Nobody believes that the weather people can predict. Nobody believes an economist can. No one's intelligence believes that a priest can say, well, yes, now that you've joined the church or done this, when you die, you'll go to heaven. Nobody believes that. You just think you might do. But notice, the intellect is driven to seek this out, while knowing that they cannot predict anything, much less their specific field of expertise. The intellect knows that no ordinary person can predict anything, which is to say, the ordinary intellect knows that there is no connection between what somebody says now and what's going to happen. Anybody that qualifies as being an ordinary human knows that. Forget about the person. Forget about speaking about personalities. I'm telling you the nervous system, below the level of education, verbalization, personal attributes, characteristics, the nervous system knows that no human can predict that whatever is said right now has no connection, no operational connection, what's said right now with what's going to happen later. Even in the field of expertise of the person speaking. Ponder it. It's almost as though that life is going to make the ordinary intellect operationally, not talking about, but operationally acknowledge the fact that whatever is said, whatever people say they believe right now, and whatever prediction is made, and it doesn't have to be on the guise of prediction, you understand. It can be something that's given as fact. But as long as it's not going on now, it's a prediction, you understand. That's what I mean. If a priest says, oh yes, there's no doubt, when you die, you're going to heaven if you're a Christian, or whatever it is. That's a prediction. That's what I mean. Even if it's stated as a fact. Or if an economist stands there and he says, I am not some hanky-panky doctor. I am the head of the Federal Reserve Board. I'm telling you, there is a recession will be here in our economy next quarter. And the President, Congress, people begin to sweat. It's a prediction. And everyone knows this. That's why I gave you a range from priests and rabbis to economists and weather people. The human nervous system knows that no prediction is valid. What is said now may have no connection, all right, does have no connection with what's going to happen. Everybody knows it, but it's as though life continues this. And it forces humanity, without knowing it, to acknowledge the fact that whatever is said, whatever is predicted, whatever is stated, whatever is believed, whatever is thought right now is unconnected to whatever is going to happen. That is the punchline. But notice, none of you even laughed this time. Nobody fell out of the chair. Nobody did anything, because the sentence made sense rhetorically. But it's past the point, if you're listening in a certain way, it's past the point that you can either go, well, I kind of hear that, I kind of don't hear it, or maybe that's true, maybe that's not. It is pushing at the very limits, operationally, of all of you people's intellect. Because I'll repeat it one more time. Not to make you react, but all of the statements made in life are predictions. Whether you don't have to look at a weatherman or somebody else, look at you. Anything that's said right now, in other words, you thinking, well, I'm going to quit smoking Monday. I'm going to quit getting drunk next week. I'm going to go visit my mother Sunday. You make it a statement, but it's a prediction. That is, if it's something you can't do now, you can say, if it's not a prediction, you'd have to say simultaneously almost, while picking up a phone dialing, you could say, I'm going to call my mother. You're getting close then to actually saying something. Everything else is a prediction. To say, I'm going to call my mother when I get home, you may not. But it's a prediction. And the human nervous system knows. I present it to you in this way. I tried to slip it in. It's almost as though life is going to force, without you recognizing it, the ordinary intellects of man to pay homage to the fact, that is, they'll turn on. Well, I'm going out of town tomorrow. I'm going to turn on, let's say it's 6:30, I'll catch the weather. The man stands there in a suit. He's paid $150,000 a year by the TV station, and he comes to work and works 8 hours, as far as I know, reading this stuff and looking at radar and taking it. And he gets up there and he draws on maps, and he's got a nice do. And he says, he states as a fact, tonight so and so is going to happen. There's going to be a storm coming through here. You can expect, such and such rain. And everybody knows this. If you're just ordinary, you know this. It's a crop of crap. He does not know. And you know he doesn't know. And you'll turn it on. And go, well, don't laugh. I'm going out of town. I like to know what the weather is. He doesn't know. And you know he doesn't know. Or wait a minute, I got money. I got all my life savings invested in some common stock. Now, wait a minute. This is the chairman. We're not talking about some rinky-dink. This is the chairman of the federal. I don't hear what he has to say. You know damn well, if you got any sense at all, he can look you dead in the eye, look in the camera and say, I can tell you without any doubt, a recession, you will be feeling the effects of a recession next quarter. And people take notes, reporters, it'll be the headlines of the Wall Street Journal, and you know he doesn't know. Now, when I say you know that he doesn't know, you people do know that this cannot be talked about. Because people do not know they know. They know, but they don't know they know. They could not know they know, or the secondary world would fall apart. But it's as though life is going to force people. That is, do you follow how I backed up? Will force you that you're going out of town. I mean, you're going to go visit your mother, or you're going off for a holiday. There's something important you want to do tomorrow, but it's dependent upon the weather. Because if the weather's going to be bad, you're not going to drive down to such and such area and do such and such. You'll put it off to next week. And so it's important. Or it's important where you've got your money. You're going to retire. Or maybe it's for your mother. And so you want to hear what is predicted or what's stated is coming up in the economy. Life makes you turn on the damn TV, makes you pick up the paper and read, while you know that it's invalid, that whatever is said now has no connection to what's going to happen. Any of you that really are still running on that stuff they used to have, unleaded, about 78 octane, I guess some of you might go, well, sometimes it does. Well, hell, sometimes a pig can fly. It has no connection with what's going to happen. You already forgot, those of you that were able to hear it, that there is a lexicon that's beyond the three-dimensional world wherein the word coincidental. Wait a minute. The head of the Federal Reserve said we was going to have a recession. I remember that. I wrote it down. It was 3 months ago, and here it is. They're announcing. I heard it on network TV. They said, we're in the midst of a recession. It did happen. In a lexicon at a place that does exist, you just can't see it yet, the word coincidental is synonymous with unconnected. So, don't listen to this whining of, well, sometimes it does happen. It's unconnected. It has no connection. Whatever is said now has no connection with what's going to happen. And everybody knows it, and life forces you to acknowledge it by operating otherwise. I'll tell you a few more. This is why, amongst other reasons, that what they call social programs do not work. Wars on poverty. Or that the cure, so you thought I'd scraped this one clean before, but listen, why you cannot cure crime by increased education. You remember, you think I've beat that around, and a lot of you got something from it. But I'm trying to take you to, push you to another level. See, before what we pointed out was such things as at the ordinary level, educated, sophisticated people can say, wait a minute, our prisons are full of people. 99% of our prisons are full of people who did not finish high school. There is not one man that's been or woman convicted of a bodily assault, a felonious assault on another person. Not one is in our prison system who is a graduate of one of the Big Ten or an Ivy League university. Therefore, proof positive that education, if we could educate these people, they would not go into a life of crime. Now you think, and I point out they've been saying that since the Roman days, and they say it today. Everybody knows it won't work. But not for any reason. It won't work because of this. Their aim and the idea of the methods have no connection. It's not that they're wrong. See, you thought it was that, before some of you that, and it was a kind of progression, but you took it as being, well, wait a minute. Boy, he's got some kind of, he can see through the crack that they don't know what they're doing. No. It's that what is apparently the aim, what is the stated aim, and any methods they come up with have no connection. That's why it won't work from their view. Of course, from another view, it doesn't not work. It's unrelated. It's not connected. But notice, humanity has to keep doing something. You've got to have some idea. If it's not education, it'd be something else. Whatever the problem is, there's got to be some approach. And in the ordinary world, educated, sophisticated people will say, well, all right, now wait a minute. Maybe what we've been doing wasn't exactly the right way, but by God, we're trying. I know. But the reason it won't, from their view, work is that the aim and the method are unconnected. What else do you want? That's why it won't work. But remember, it's not that it won't work. That's not it. Because there's no cure for that. That's the way it's supposed to be. But it's them saying, well, wait, we try to go from here to there, and something keeps happening. We try, and we'd like to cut out poverty. They were saying that 7,000 years ago. Well, 7,000 years ago, everybody was hungry. But at any rate, ever since a few people got enough to eat, and they could afford a typewriter and started writing history, they started looking around and saying, well, let's take better care of our fellow man. So if it wasn't crime, it was let's feed the hungry. They've been trying to do that for 7,000 years, same way with crime. They're no closer. Not because it's wrong, but notice whatever they see as a problem, and then whatever they try to do. Well, all right, here's what let's do, and they keep trying. They tried, free market. Well, let's give everybody a piece of property, and everybody go out and farm. They try that, and they still got X percentage of people that apparently they call going hungry. Then they say, well, let's stop that, and we'll become socialist or communist or whatever it is. And they say, we'll all pool our resources, and that way nobody will go hungry. Same amount's hungry. Then they have another coup, and it goes to some other direction. It just goes on, and none of it works. But why? Well, and if you're ordinary, you say, well, it's the stupidity of bureaucracy, or they're trying outdated methods, or they're trying too radical methods. Doesn't matter. They're trying to go from here to there, and there's no connection between the path and where they're going. How about into areas that might not seem quite as marketplacey? How about into the great world of religion, for instance? How about man's steadfast love of and pursuit of rituals such as prayer? A great one, or lighting candles, but let's say prayer. They got that all over the world, all throughout history. Why is it that people continue to pursue that kind of ritualistic behavior? Prayer, in the greatest sense of the word. Everything connected, like going in and light candles, or have to repeat a certain thing, or bow a certain way, turn around. You understand what it is. Whatever the religion is, or if it could even be outside a religious context, it's all over the world, throughout history. But religious is the easier way to talk about it. Men will pursue, in the widest extent, prayer, when everybody knows prayer doesn't work. Lighting candles won't work. Doing beads like this, sing your money to some TV preacher, sing it to the Vatican. None of that works. And everybody knows it. Again, we'll assume that you're past the point that you're going to listen to your little brain say, the old part of your little brain, say something like, well, wait a minute. I knew a guy one time that prayed that his mother wouldn't die when she was sick, and sure enough, she lived another 2 years. Everyone knows in the same way. This is no different than what I was pointing out about weather forecasters and economists. Everyone knows that prayer doesn't work. That is, ritualistic behavior doesn't work. And it's as though life grabs everybody, like some poor little kitten, and forces you to go ahead and do it anyway, and to claim that it does work, to claim that you believe it. And you do believe it. When you know it doesn't work. When you know that it's unconnected, that is, your ritualistic behavior is unconnected with that which you hope for. Everyone knows it. You can pray, you can fall down and do these things on some saint's holiday, crawling your hands and knees through glass or miles up some kind of big stone walkway and just beat yourself up and beat yourself with whips. You can do all of that, and everybody knows. I keep saying everybody. You do understand? I'm talking about the energy behind it. The energy inside the human nervous system. If it knew enough for us to say that it knew and it could talk, it knows that has no connection. That behavior has no connection with what they're hoping for, what they say they're hoping for. Everyone knows it. They know that you could light candles until you burn up the whole damn world, and it has no connection whatsoever to please, dear God, let this one ticket, it was my last dollar, be the payoff for the Florida lottery. And of course, life does this, that some guy, of course, somebody got to win the lottery. Some guy wins $140 million, and they say, boy, how's it feel? And the guy said, well, the first thing I want to do is thank God. Because I was praying, that was my last dollar. My family, and I prayed to God, and I told God, you know, if you'll let me win this, I'll give part of it to a church, which I still may do. But I'll give part. I'll get into that later. And I told God that I'd quit biting my fingernails. Now he says that, and people go, oh boy. But you know it's not true. If that's too far, one more. Of course, this takes an extraordinary mind to even see the little bit I was going to give you one more setup, but you got to get past that. It's like everybody goes to battle. You know, the Jews against the Arabs against Christians, or two groups of Christians, Protestants against Catholics. Now, they start to go to war, and what do? They're king, they're leaders, the educated. Not fools, the educated. They get on their knees, or they do whatever rituals are, and they pray. They do it at basketball games, high schools, colleges, against each other. Oh God, please be on our side. Let a just cause win. When you know damn well that right across the valley, the other group's praying to God, let me win. And whoever wins will say something like, well, praise be to God, and the king, whatever king wins, whatever king is triumphed, he'll tax the defeated, and he'll raise a new church, a new temple, because God let him win. How about those other fuckers? Everybody knows that none of that has any connection. That is, the apparent aim and the method, that is what they're praying for, what they're hoping for, has no connection with how they started. The ritualistic behavior, the prayers, the supplications, the lighting of candles is unconnected, and everybody knows it, except they can't be allowed to know it. And this is though life forces you to keep going on. One little side place, within religion and even philosophy, life forces the educated. When I say religious, I don't mean that people are dumb or misled. They might be from a city view, but educated, all the way from the most primitive forms of religion, even right now, to the most sophisticated, educated people interested in philosophy. They are still engaged with the kind of intellectual debate in the greatest sense of the word. That is, they entertain, they assume, they will accept. They might not want to say believe, but they believe in the connectedness of cause and effect. In such things, not just religiously, but I'll use the religious one of you reap what you sow. Now, in philosophy, if a man could be an atheist and he still believes in the causal nature of the universe, scientists do. And again, they know it's not true. You don't reap what you sow. And every now and then it pops up. But then, they can't see this. Religious people are scientists. Take your own version. But let's say a religious person will say, well, you reap what you sow. But then they're faced with the fact that the dishonest thrive. Of course, then they have to say things, well, God will get him after you die. Again, I'm trying to show you, it's as though life is forcing people to unknowingly acknowledge the fact that there is no connection with what they say and believe and what's going to happen in a few seconds. Not in the 3D sense. And they will say, well, there's no doubt. People will die, according to history. People will die rather than deny that, no, you reap what you sow. And I believe if you live an honest, upright life, you'll win. You'll be blessed. How do you explain the fact? I don't think about that. How can you explain anomalies? Of course, science has their own way to deal with that. They just keep stalling it off, like, well, we don't know yet, we don't know yet. But the inference being, we don't know yet, that we will know. They're not going to know because there's no connection with what's going on now. Whatever it is, whatever you say, whatever you plan, whatever you swear you're going to do, which is a prediction, it is unconnected. Let me leave it. I don't want to get you confused with me qualifying it too much and saying it's absolutely unconnected. It's just unconnected. And from a certain way, what I thought some of you, I guess you already saw it, got the juice out of it. Philosophy, religion, just common sense, all the ideas that you reap what you sow. They start playing around with life after death, or life makes them play around with it. Karma. But yes, you reap what you sow. There's no doubt about it. A man, live by the sword, die by the sword, and all that crap, and it's not true. And you know it's not true. Those who live by the sword, die by the sword. What they're saying is just reap what you sow. Like, boy, people that go around pushing other people around, somebody's going to push them around. It may or may not happen, but remember what coincidental is synonymous with in one place. And by and large, well, forget by and large, you don't need examples. Everybody knows this without knowing it. That those that live by the sword don't die by the sword. And don't tell me that somebody over here did die by the sword. Sure he did. But here's another guy that died by falling in an alligator pit. So what? Live by the alligator, die by the alligator. That there is no more connection, there is no more ability to predict that than there is to say, live by the sword, die by the sword. Or those who cheat others themselves will be cheated. You know that's not true. And you're left with, well, that's a heavy philosophical question every now and then when I do notice these anomalies. Life forces people, almost, to pay homage to the fact that there is no predicting. No one's prediction is valid because it is unconnected to what is said right now and what's going to happen. Some of you, if you recall, many of you, some people, liked a kind of first stage of freedom when you begin to realize, I'll use one of our classic examples, that there you are doing your morning jog and a pickup truck flies by and somebody throws an empty beer bottle out and somebody hollers out, screw you. There is a kind of initial freedom to begin to realize that this stranger, kinds of occurrences that for years have upset you, made you cry, made you mad, to begin to realize it was not personally directed at you, even when I started making up examples. Once you realize the connectedness of that guy, my made-up example, of his earlier problems in the day. His wife just left him. He just lost his job. His baby daughter, his only girl, died last night and he's been drunk all night. You start thinking about, well, that kind of connection. I don't like somebody, he didn't hit me, but it's a kind of freedom to realize, wait a minute, all my life, just strangers. I could be in a stadium with 70,000 people and I hear a voice somewhere holler, screw you. And I just knew they're talking about me. But to begin to realize not only is that sort of silly and invalid that, at football games when they get in a huddle, they're not actually talking about you. To get past that down to the level actually of somebody going past and looking out a window of a car or truck and actually looking at you for a second and holler, hey, screw you. And they drove off. Just went on their way. But to realize that there's a freedom. That was not local. That was not a local phenomenon. That was not personally directed at me. Oh, yeah, he looked at me, he said it. But for me to kind of make up the examples, which actually, of course, happened. The guy's daughter last night got hit by a drunk. She just got killed. His little baby daughter, beautiful girl. And he's been up all night drunk. Imagine how you would be if that happened to you. Hey, there's a kind of freedom in that. To realize that, by God, life is tough. Things are connected. Reality is not just a local phenomenon with me. I'm not the center of the universe. I mean, at first, that kind of thing made me mad, or it used to. I guess it still could if somebody going by and cursed me, even a stranger. But, once you find out, once you just think about that guy's got his own problem. Maybe his daughter didn't get killed last night. I mean, it could be something kind of minor. It could be that he just started to go to work today. He was a carpenter and got over there and found out that because of all the rain last night, that they didn't get in some of the supplies, and so he's lost a day's work, and he's just mad. That's not as bad as his daughter dying, but wait a minute. If you're a little better than an average person, you got to face up to this. You have done the same damn thing. Whether you went by and threw a beer bottle at somebody, you've gone past people on the street, or a car gets too close to you when you've had a bad morning, maybe just you didn't have coffee in time, maybe you slept late, something that small, and somebody goes past you, and in your heart you went, screw you. So, boy, you start getting to be intellectual, you start getting to be spiritual, you start having increased consciousness to understand that, wait a minute, all of life's connected. And somebody, their daughter didn't have to die, because I get mad. I've cursed people before just because my coffee was cold when I got this morning. That's horrible to admit, but that's true. I should start thinking, because other people, the guy that hollered at me, the guy that cursed at me, it could have been his daughter died. Think how it'd be if I tried to chase him down and I hollered, screw you too! And what if somebody came up and says, that guy, did you see the news last night about that little girl that got run over at the intersection? Yeah. I happen to know that was that guy. Then you would, oh, well, I wish I hadn't said that to him. Okay. But what if you just found out, if a guy stepped out of the bushes and said that guy just cursed at you, that you were trying to throw the beer bottle back at him? He just stopped and got a coffee to go up at McDonald's, and he opened it after you drove away, and it was cold. Same thing. But here's what I want you to consider. What a feeling initially of freedom to begin to think in such a way as to how all this is connected. All of life is connected, so that you don't take the things such as even somebody looking out a window of a car going by and look at you up and down right in the face and say, screw you. But to realize the connectedness of everything, and to realize the connectedness of the problems he had earlier today or last night of his daughter dying, and then this happening. Think of the freedom of that. All of you have been through various stages of that. Would you care? Would you let me try and push you where I'm further than that? There's another one. There's a place of even greater release. It's beyond that. It's not where you begin to see everything connected. You see that everything is unconnected. And that the person going by hollering, screw you, and you're mad. Or they say screw you, and you almost get mad, and then you go, wait a minute, that's the guy whose daughter got killed. And you don't get mad. No connection. When it's obviously not true. It cannot be true. There is some connection. An ordinary person gets mad when he's insulted, when someone directs hostility, or when something bad happens, like the guy in the truck. Somebody dies, a part of your family, and you're depressed. It may come out as aggression towards somebody else. All of this, by God, is connected. And to begin to realize that is a certain kind of freedom. Beyond that, there's a freedom you wouldn't realize. And I'm telling you, beyond that, the guy that goes by in the truck and says, screw you. And after that, feel anything you want to. You get mad, or you get pensive, or you get angry, or you get frightened, or you stop and you go, I almost got mad, but hey, I understand everything's connected. There's a place past all that. That still, somebody goes by and looks out a window and hollers, screw you. Whatever you say happened to you, there's a place where it's got no connection. It is unconnected to that. Let me rephrase it. I was going to try to wrap it up. If you enjoyed the kind of freedom, the pleasure, the intellectual, whatever you want to call it, enjoyment, release, calming, of realizing how everything's connected, you don't know anything yet. To realize that everything is equally unconnected. All right? What it amounts to, this other place, it's not that the first stage is wrong. That's why I'm calling it a stage. And most people never get there. There's only very, very, very few people ever have any continual, that their nervous system ever extends to the extent of here, that they have some continuing, more or less, awareness and remembrance that everything is connected. That freedom, that pleasure, I'm telling you, is almost nothing. Now, as great as it is, I'm telling you there's somewhere else that you understand that everything is equally unconnected. At this place, consider it this way. At this place, it's beyond whether it's connected, it's just that they're equal and unconnected. But all of these problems of things, one thing either causing something else or it caused it indirectly, this other place is a place to where you don't even have to think about any of this.